The unfortunate explosion in Lagos, which yesterday claimed 15 lives, coupled with the destruction of millions of dollars worth of property, is just one out of a series of developments that have been at the heart of Nigerian public discourse in recent times. Public reaction to these issues have been as diverse as the geographical makeup of the nation itself. We shall now review a bit of some of them by speaking with Dr. Austin Nweze, a public affairs commentator and former governorship candidate of the People's Democratic Party in Ebonyi State. Welcome to the program. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Dr. Nweze.
Yeah, good to see you
welcome
again.
back to Lagos.
Yeah.
Because each time I call you were in Ebonyi State.
That's right.
Well, we'll talk about the explosion in Abule Ado. But before then, let's start with coronavirus. Yeah. Now, all over the world, countries have been taking preventive measures. They've been taking proactive steps, particularly with regard to the economy. Now, in Nigeria, we've also been told that the economy is affected. Big sell-off in the stocks market, right? The Naira has been going up and down like a yo-yo.
That's right.
Oil price has crashed. It's gone up a little bit again. And, you know, Nigeria depends on crude oil.
Yes.
Right. So what do you think Nigeria should be doing? Because there are concerned persons saying that Nigeria has not taken enough steps to address the economic fallout. Only yesterday, the U.S. Federal Reserve brought interest rate down to almost zero. But we are here. We haven't had anything on the monetary side.
That's right. I think the economy, we're heading towards the recession that we don't want to hear. And hope that it won't lead to depression, you know, because the way things are going, oil at, you know, $34, $35 per barrel, and which is a major revenue source for the nation. And then how danger there is that we may not be able to finance the budget. We need to borrow more, and which they are also doing. And again, the stock exchange was diving losing about 1.something trillion or so, and you know, so all these things. And what the government should do is to look at, because look at that interest rate, okay? Now, because interest rate has a way of influencing the entire economy. Knock it down so that businesses, banks, and then reduce the cash reserve ratio, so banks can have more money to play around, so that they'll be able to fund more businesses. And then again, support some local production and take advantage of what is going on outside. What are they not producing? And see how we can increase our domestic production. And knowing that importation of any item will be a bit restricted. And if we don't have enough, you know, to do all of this, you may have money but nothing to buy with the money. So these are challenges that, you know, need government urgent attention. And our economic managers should be able to think ahead that we don't have much cases of the virus here. It's not something that we should, you know, sit back and say, okay, well, nothing concerns us, but we have to be more proactive in dealing with these issues and find out what can we do, what sectors of the economy can we support right now, you know, with this thing happening. So that's what the managers of the economy should be doing.
Do you see CBN extending that list of items that are restricted from accessing official forex to conserve our reserves?
Well, it's one thing again is that the CBN, they're carrying too much, both going into the fiscal policy side, and everybody looks at CBN as the main managers of the economy. Quite all right, but when the fiscal policy side is weak, you know, it affects the monetary policy side. And that's why CBN seems to be overworked. So they need to really look at the ways of, you know, having more of those things that, you know, not really looking at importation or reducing the list of imported items that this, you know, basically what will help us produce within. They've been doing inflation targeting for years, and it's not helping us. And defending the Naira. What they should do is, what can we do? What other sectors can we do to produce locally and not really importation, okay? So they should look at areas. There are so many areas that we can, okay, like when they closed the border, they didn't make proper arrangement for it. If you want to grow your domestic this thing, all you need to, those states that have some factor endowments, take for instance, some states produce rice. Ebonyi State is one of them. What the government should have done, even before closing the border, for instance, is make sure that they are, look at the states and see where areas they need their gaps, and put some financial support there. And then go to KB. We give targets. You need to produce some quantum of rice, for instance. Go to different other states who are producing one thing or the other and support. Then you close the border. Nigerians will have enough. We can now begin to ship out of the country. So, I don't support a situation where they will have more lists of items to be imported, to use our exchange to import. No. We should look at domestic production. And that's how you solve even the inflation targeting they're doing. We can't avoid it. I always said that, look, let the inflation go and let the exchange rate go, one side. Initially, inflation, sorry. And when inflation, at a point, there will be a convergence. When the domestic production is high, like they say, supply always creates its own demand. There's always equilibrium somewhere, So by the time, in the longer term, yes, short-term inflation will be high, but longer term, there'll be a convergence. Then inflation will drop naturally, okay? So what we should do is, what can we produce here? I keep saying it. Some of these things, when the Ebola thing came, the government spent 200 billion, but the minister said for buying of vehicles and maintaining some, and I was disappointed. How can you have 200 billion? You're not thinking of what can we produce here? Look, nations develop when you become original equipment manufacturers. This thing is happening now. Our researchers should be, medical research teams or these researchers should be researching on how we can, improve or develop our own in-house this thing. Professor Iwu Morrissey, who came up with the fact that him and his team have solution for the coronavirus. And nobody is talking about it. Maybe, maybe not. What they should do is get them, fund them. What are the things that they need? And there are other ancillary businesses or services that could be provided, through this research. It's not just on its own. So he has a way of also making Nigeria, even if the Western world don't believe or not that, we can use it, demonstrate, use it in-house. Within our own, to treat our own situations. Then after, they will be forced to listen to us. We should not be saying no, depending on them to do all the research for us. No, we need to have a homegrown stuff that we have to do ourselves. Local production, we have to think to solve our problems, not outsourcing our thinking to maybe China and all that for them to do it for us. We need to be here.
Well, the CBN governor did mention intervention into pharmaceuticals now. Mentioned that recently at that roundtable. Oh,
okay. I hope that the intervention will be, be within to help the manufacturing companies here to do a homegrown stuff, not imported.
Absolutely.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, when we spoke to the MD of NAFDAC, I believe it was last week or about 10 days ago, she expressed how much this is needed as well. And it's inspiring. You mentioned how we should be having our own research, etc. Last week, we heard about Senegal, how they came out with the 10-minute test kits for coronavirus that's now being used in the UK. Yeah. And coming back home to our economic problems and stuff, yes, it is really worrying to see how this has been a wake-up call, if we even needed one, because now even looking at our 2020 budget that has to be reviewed, Nigeria is in a serious crisis here that cannot be ignored. But I'd like to speak about a recent crisis that happened yesterday that we're discussing today. The governor was currently, Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu was currently just briefing the press as well in Abule Adu, where the incidents happened in Amuodofin, local government area of Lagos, with a gas explosion that was an absolute tragedy that has taken the lives of many. What is your analysis of the response of our security agencies and the government to this crisis? I mean, this is happening one too many times now in different ways. The exact same issue, different ways, but it just continues to happen. What is your analysis of this?
Well, I first said about it when I turned on my WhatsApp and I saw a video that gone viral. Calling for help. Please, if you know any fire service, please let them know. If you have any information about this is what is going on now and all that. I don't know how long it took them to get there, because I was teaching a class yesterday, and so I didn't listen to know what happened after how long it took them to. But again, our response system is always, fire service will blame lack of water for, there may not be fuel in the fire truck. There may not be one thing or the other. The officer in charge may not be there. That's okay. Maybe being Sunday, there might be a church service or something like that. But our response, this thing, is always too poor. And then the NEMA, National Emergency Agency, and Lagos State Emergency Agency also, the response again. Now equipment. I believe that they borrowed those equipment they use. I'll be surprised if they have those equipment ready, because usually they'll say, okay, we don't have this. Julius Berger will help us to do one thing or the other and all that. So, and I've been saying, look, we need to be knowing that these things don't give you signal, that, hey, emergencies don't give you signal, that we're coming. A natural disaster will not give you a sign or say, we're coming, we're announcing. Something could just happen.
But this isn't a natural disaster, is it? And that's what makes it worse. This is human error.
It's a human error. It's not a natural disaster, okay? So which means that those people, they need to go back to the drawing board, study the whole thing, have a post-mortem meeting and say, look, what caused it? How can we prevent such a thing from happening again? Now, okay, the pipeline houses are, near the pipelines. Can we move them? What else can we do to prevent this kind of thing happening again? So if you have that in place, next time, but we don't tend to learn lessons from what has happened, and which is why we need to have an organization, we call it organizational knowledge, okay? So we need to build that on what happened, so that when such a thing happens, those in charge will go back to them and say, okay, this was what happened, this was the way it was handled. What lesson, do we learn? Use that lesson to deal with the new situation. But no. So anyway, lives have been lost, properties have been lost, and then, government will have a way of reconstructing that place, make it more, whoever, if the closeness to the pipeline and all that, they should have a way of making sure that this kind of thing, does not happen again.
Dr. Nweze, let me interrupt you. We need to take a short break. Okay. When we return, the conversation will continue. Thank you for staying with us. Right. We'll be right back. It's still the Morning Show. Welcome back to the Morning Show here on the Arise News Channel. Still with us in our Lagos studio is Dr. Austin Nweze, a public affairs commentator and a former governorship candidate of the Social Democratic Party, SDP, in EBONYI State. Well, Dr. Nweze, before we went on break, you had commented on the tragedy that occurred yesterday at Abule Ado with all the explosions and the devastation, and to borrow Tundu's phrase, the catastrophe. Yeah. But let's go back to the economy and talk about the Naira. With oil prices tumbling, stock market crashing and all that, there was a lot of anxiety about the Naira. And that resulted in the panic stockpiling of Forex. Yeah. Now, many Nigerians thought that with the future of the Naira being so uncertain, that maybe perhaps it will be devalued eventually by the CBN. But the CBN, the Central Bank of Nigeria, later issued a statement saying that Nigeria has enough reserves to stabilize the Naira. Do we really have enough foreign reserves to stabilize the Naira? Or you think devaluation is inevitable? Or perhaps the Naira will just continue to, depreciate and improve like we have seen?
I think the Naira should be officially allowed to be determined by market forces. Demand, supply, and stuff like that. Because when you continue to defend the Naira, if you devalue the Naira, countries that devalue their currencies is when the strategy is to be export-oriented, to make their goods to be more competitive in the global market space. And again, we should as well borrow from what happened in the 70s when the Arab War the Yom Kippur War and all that. Indonesia did something that helped them to develop their destiny. And what they did was to, when other countries their currencies were appreciating, and they decided to, devalue increase the domestic production of their products so that we're more competitive out there. And they pushed on the export idea and moved on, companies moved on out overseas and started setting up this thing. After the crisis, those countries that their currencies appreciated began to devalue their currencies. Indonesia's unnaturally began to, because the business, their export earnings and all that. We should allow, if we devalue for what, are we exporting more? Oil is a major thing. The other non-oil destination have not been actively, engaged to be able to, bring in this thing. Now, if we look at our current account balance, we have a surplus right now, in the sense that in products, it's good for a country to have a surplus, and have a surplus in the sense that trade balance, in the sense that you export more goods than you import.
But in quarter 4 of 2019,
yes,
we reported a trade deficit,
yes,
the highest.
Yes.
579 billion naira.
Yes, it's not good. That means we're importing more than we're. But in current account, when it comes to money, it's better for a country, to have a deficit, in the sense that what it means is that less naira or dollar is leaving Nigeria than is, less naira is leaving Nigeria than is coming in. More is coming in than more money is being imported, okay, than when, than being taken away, capital flight. Right now we're experiencing, because of the, uncertainties, politically and otherwise, some companies are leaving. There's some capital flight ongoing, because nobody is sure of what's going on. And again, we are having, in 2006, 2009, I think Nigeria had about up to 11 billion, used to be the highest, it's still about the highest in Africa, foreign direct investment. Money is coming in, followed by South Africa and Egypt. Okay. But now, that amount has gone beyond, maybe between 5 and 7 billion. Okay.
I hope it's not money from portfolio investors.
Well, the money from portfolio investors, when the stock market, the portfolio investors invest in 3 areas. The stock market, the oil and gas and telecoms, the financial services. Those are the 4 major areas that they invest. Okay. So when things begin to go, the first thing they do is to take away their funds, and then you see like what happened in the stock market. It's as a result of that. So some monies are being taken away, but the managers of the economy should be able to come up with policies on how to provide more incentives for them. Now, what are they looking for? A more certain, predictive environment for their businesses. Less taxes. The tax rate is too high. Interest rate is too high. Okay, and these are things that they are looking at. Okay, return on investment for them. In Africa, Nigeria, South Africa, and Egypt, these 3 countries are always the majors, and how much how much return they get determines how much money they can invest in those countries. So it's important to think of how do we at least keep what we're doing and attract more of this foreign capital, so that we can, really help to grow the economy. And where you invest the money is, we need to invest more, when any money coming in, to invest more in production, in manufacturing. Okay, that is where how we can create jobs. That is how we can, begin to revive the economy, produce what we can, build the middle class, because the middle class of every nation determines what is to be consumed. They determine what the direction the economy goes. They determine what is to be consumed. When Brazil, between 2 presidents, Da Silva and Godaro, moved Brazil from number 10 to number 6, within a period of 8 years, they were able to move about 24 million Brazilians to the middle class. And that was how the economy grew. The manufacturing base need to be, first of all, using our raw materials, building the raw material base first and transitioning to manufacturing. These are the things that we need to do. How do we, revive our manufacturing base so that, it will really help other sectors of the economy? But now, every eye is on oil. Now that oil is doing this, it's affecting this thing, every other thing that we do. And it's not right. We need to do something about our manufacturing. We need to produce more goods. We need to even, bring in people coming in. Government should be able to tell them, okay, you're coming in as maybe portfolio investors and all that. And then why don't we grow our venture capital that will help small businesses do all of this? Bank of Industry will not help us. Conventional banks will not help us. So a whole gamut of things that we need to do to help this economy. It's not just one thing. It's not one thing. So we need to look at the different things that we can do, which could be using the government policies to be able to provide incentives for investors to deal with this situation. So that's, I think, will help the economy a whole lot.